Thank you all so much for coming to It Takes a Village, pro bono support in family law. We are excited to learn more about the needs for pro bono in family law here in the district. We will be recording this panel for folks that want to review anything that we talk about or would like to view this after today. That will be available in the follow-up email. A little bit of housekeeping. We are on a webinar today, so please use the chat feature to join the conversation, and please put your questions in the Q&A function. We will be reviewing the Q&A for questions for the panelists at the end. And in just a moment, I will be launching a poll. Please let us know your experience in family law and where you're joining us from. And with that being said, I think we're going to get started. I'll turn it over to Jen Massey and I will launch our poll.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yes, we'd love to see where everyone is joining us from today. So you should see the poll. Question 1, what best describes your position? Go ahead and look through those options. And then the second question that's launched at the same time is just a rating scale of your experience to family law 0 to 7. So let's say zero is nada, absolutely nothing, to 7, you feel as though you're an expert. So we'll give you all some moments to just reply to these quick poll questions. And anyone who's joined now can also just add their name and where they're joining us from in the chat. Thank you for those of you who've done that, just getting a sense of who's with us here today. And Chris, whenever you feel like we've got the poll questions at a mass, you can let us know what the results are.
100%. We've got 100% of question 1 answered, about 90% of question 2. I might lump the last few folks into our 0 and 1. So I'll end the poll so that we can see the results. I believe they're sharing right now. So you have a lot of folks from law firms, folks from non-legal or non-lawyer legal professionals, which is fantastic. And we've got a lot of folks at the inexperienced end of our rating scale. So here to learn a lot with us today.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for taking the time to join us on this Monday, this DC Pro Bono Week panel focusing on family law. It takes a village. And so we are here to talk about the value of pro bono representation in family law. And we're really talking broadly about family-related matters. So we will talk about high volume calendars at DC Superior Court, like the Domestic Relations Branch, where you'll hear child custody matters, according to the DC Access to Justice Commission's 2019 report and the numbers we believe and trust to continue. We have 83 to 93% of litigants in these cases who are going unrepresented. We are very grateful to have Judge Veronica Sanchez, who sits on that very active calendar of Domestic Relations Branch, share her perspective from the bench about what this really looks like in practice today. Family-related issues in child protection order cases, we're going to touch on that as well. Again, from the DC Access to Justice Commission, 88 to 95% of litigants in those matters are unrepresented, and we're excited to have Jacob from Rising for Justice tell us more about that. We're going to touch on some current family law needs that also arise in the immigration context. So you'll hear from Jennedy today about child custody, but also immigration work. And after today's panel, we're going to share more information with you, including from a prior panelist who's joined us in the past for Mothers Outreach Network, and some work that really focuses on assisting families prior to entering into the abuse and neglect calendar at DC Superior Court, really working on some family preservation issues. So when we talk about family law and we talk about family-related work and pro bono opportunities, it's a pretty broad spectrum of need. to get us started, we are going to do some brief introductions and talk about these experiences a little more before digging into some questions about myths and challenges and values and all of the things. So to start, I'll say I am, as noted, the pro bono director at Children's Law Center. Our organization and mission is really to focus on building a strong foundation of family health and education. And part of our family law work that I'm representing from Children's Law Center today is our guardian ad litem work, GAL, which is an attorney role in the district representing the invisible best interests of a child in a contested custody case, in cases that are before Judge Sanchez and her colleagues at DC Superior Court. We're one of only 2 legal services organizations accepting these referrals, and we both rely heavily on pro bono volunteers to meet this very overwhelming need. So I'll bring some of that perspective today to the conversation, turning over to our panelists to introduce themselves and just share a little bit more about their experience, where they see the need for pro bono representation. I'll just go in ABC order, start with Jacob and then Jennedy and then over to Judge Sanchez. So Jacob, if you can just briefly introduce yourself and talk about your experience based on our conversation today.
Great. Well, thanks, Jen. Thanks, everyone, for being here, and really excited to talk about this. This is really near and dear to my heart and everyone's hearts. And so a little bit about myself and our organization. I am the program director for the Respondent Representation Program at Rising for Justice. We are the only organization in DC that represents respondents in civil protection orders, no matter what the charge is. And because of the poll, I'll just kind of explain a little bit of a civil protection order is when someone feels like an intra-family offense has been committed against them. They can apply for a civil protection order, which is a temporary, basically stay away, that is supposed to be, you know, a Band-Aid, right? It's not the criminal process. It is supposed to kind of make sure that someone feels protected. As part of that process, as part of a stay away, there is issues that deal with custody and visitation for children, which is why I'm here. So we represent respondents. We represent the people who are accused of those intrafamily offenses. And so the vast majority of our clients who we talk to have no problem with the stay away order. They, like every human, think, oh, if this person doesn't want to be around me, okay, I don't think we need to get the courts involved, but that's fine. That's fine. The times that people really have an issue is when something else is in play. Sometimes it's housing, sometimes it's job, but for the vast majority, it's kids, right? It's a thing of, that's fine, I will stay away from the mother of my child or the father of my child. But what they're asking for of full custody, of only supervised visits, that's not acceptable. I need help with that. So the issue is that, as I said, we are the only kind of game in town. There was last year about 6,000 civil protection order and anti-stalking orders filed in DC. We can do about 100 on our own. So the need for pro bono, for compassionate lawyers, and I define a compassionate lawyer who's interested in this as someone who believes that no matter what someone did, a person deserves to be a parent, right? No matter what mistakes a parent makes, they deserve a chance to be in their kid's life. And no matter what their kid's parents do, the kid needs all of the support that they can get. And so that's what we try and do, right? And that's why we need more help to do it.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Jennedy.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me here for this panel and for everyone for joining. As Jacob and Jen both said, it's a very important topic and it really does take a village. I, in many cases, rely on both Jen and Jacob's organizations, in my cases, as I'm representing a party. So I'm to back up with the DC Bar Pro Bono Center. I'm the managing attorney for family law and immigration, and I'm primarily in front of the domestic relations branch, although sometimes we are in the child support branch specifically and or in the civil protective order branch. You heard the statistics, and they are stark, and they continue to be. We do a lot of work to get those numbers more manageable internally, but the demand simply outweighs the supply for our organizations. And so we really, really, truly rely on volunteers. And at the DC Bar Pro Bono Center, we end up helping anyone who comes through the door because we firmly believe that everyone deserves access to a lawyer and everyone deserves to be navigating this justice system with ease and respect and dignity. And so we help parents, we help third parties, so those people who are not a bio parent in a custody case. So maybe sometimes an older sibling, aunt, uncle, grandparent needs to be involved in the case as a third party. We help people who are accusing others of an interfamily offense, and we also help people who are being accused, as Jacob said. And so we very firmly believe it does not matter either, that everyone deserves access to justice and to the court system, and that it really does take a village, right? If parent A is accusing parent B of some act, well, the whole family needs to be stabilized in safety, right? And the best interest of the children cannot be considered or protected if person B doesn't know how to follow their protective order or what it means, or person A and B can't communicate in a healthy way. And so our goal is really to embrace that mentality of collaborative litigation and make sure that everybody is working together for the best interest of the child and the family as we represent whichever party. And so we see the highest need for sure in the domestic relations branch is primarily where we are. We oftentimes get cases same day through the Family Law Assistance Network where people really need a lawyer that day just to get them through the next part of their case. And so we're happy to represent and place cases pro bono, both in limited scope and in full representation. So we provide a range of opportunities, which I'll chat about later.
Thank you so much, Genevieve. Judge Sanchez, thank you again for joining us. If you can do a brief introduction and share your experience.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Good, I guess, afternoon now. I'm Judge Veronica Sanchez. I have been doing, well, let me back up a little bit. I actually joined the bench in January of 2023. Goodness. So this will be my third year. And since I joined Superior Court, I've only been doing family cases. So I'm on the DRB calendar and I handle domestic relations cases, which means custody, divorce, child support as part of that as well. And yeah, it's my third year doing that. And I will say that I would agree that it is about, I feel like it's 85, 90% of the individuals before me that are pro se, so not many that are represented. And if they are represented, I also may not see them much because usually if they're represented through the lawyers, they're able to work out an agreement that is quickly settles the matter before me, either even at an initial hearing or even by the first or second status that I see them. So there is certainly a large need for representation and also guardian ad litems. We have more cases than we have availability of guardian ad litems.
Thank you so much. Yes, another plug for that need. Well, as we talk about these issues today, this area of work, this huge need for pro bono representation, part of the purpose of putting this panel together initially a few years ago during DC Pro Bono Week is to also discuss and unpack some of the challenges surrounding this type of work. So we want to start this next part of the discussion really naming some of the myths and having our expert panelists share their perspectives. Genevieve, I'm going to start with you. What is a common myth or myths, however you'd like to spend your time, to dispel about family law clients or cases?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple that I want to highlight. One, predominantly, Jacob kind of alluded to, is that some clients don't deserve representation. Oftentimes in this work, we interact with cases that have clients or opposing parties or parents or children that have mental health issues. There might be incarceration issues, substance use disorders. There might be accusations or history of domestic violence and safety concerns. And the idea that maybe that one parent who is experiencing that, or maybe is temporarily unhoused, etc., doesn't deserve to be a parent or isn't a good parent, I think is a big myth. And the fact that they don't need counsel is an even bigger myth because they arguably need counsel more than ever. And again, when we're thinking about the village of protecting the family and stabilizing the family and the children, it's so important for those clients specifically to have representation to help navigate those challenges, to stabilize, get the support they need, and find a way for them to be meaningfully involved in their child's life or maybe appropriately re-enter the child's life and reestablish a relationship. And so I think for me, that's a big myth I see with a pro bono experience. I think the other myth I see is I had a family law case before and I'm never touching it again. They're all bad. They're all, wild. It took too long. I had this one case, or I heard this one case, and I just, want to urge you and challenge people not to let either one experience or what you've heard hinder you. Every family is different, which is the fun part of family law, honestly. Every family is different. Every case is different. Every issue and values that the families have and the parties have is different. And so you're never going to get the same experience twice, and it's super rewarding work. So I think those are the two big myths I would highlight.
Thank you so much. Jacob, what might you add to what Gennady just shared?
Yeah, so obviously a little bit the same, but I think the biggest myth, and I should say the biggest issue that people have with kind of representing respondents is they think they're scary, right? They think that before I did this, I was a public defender for over a decade in New York. And the question I always got, you would think is like, oh, how can you defend people who you are guilty or whatever? But that most people don't answer the question. The question is, oh, do you feel scared? Right? These people who are accused of bad things. Are you like, how do you deal with your fear? And for a long time, I didn't know what they meant, right? Are you scared because of some jail, like whatever? Because when you are interacting with a client, turns out they're human, right? And so they are almost to a person grateful, kind, and just want help. And especially when we're talking about this context, for all parents who are here, if there is someone who's sitting across from you who can help you with your child, you're going to do whatever they want. You're going to be whoever you want them to be, right? They want you to be like, and that's the experience, right? It is almost it's just not that scary. There is not a danger element to representing kind of people who are accused of those things. And just to be kind of all the cards on the table from a pro bono perspective, if there was anything with kind of mental health or anything like that, there is no way we would ever refer someone who we were worried about mental health or anything like that to a pro bono attorney, unless that's what you're in for. That's great, right? And so it really is, people are people who want help, right? And that is just anybody. And it just turns out in this sphere, it's people who want help with their kids, right? But it is people who are just vulnerable and kind of want help. And the second thing, and just to go off what Gennady said, is that where I'm located in the civil protection order context is slightly different than the DRB, slightly different than domestic relations branch, where those take a long time. In civil protection order cases, they are designed to basically have hearings within a few weeks. And so the cases are very discreet. It is basically a mini criminal trial, and then it's a sentencing phase. And that sentencing phase is like what happens with the order. And so the prolonged aspect is just not really kind of in effect or relevant for the civil protection order. Sometimes we continue on with representation if we can, but for civil protection order cases, you're kind of, it's the cases last, no more than probably a month, 6 weeks.
Thank you so much. And so turning to you, Judge Sanchez, you just heard obviously from Jennedy and Jacob that perspective of serving clients and, seeing how they're engaging with their clients and some of the myths and sort of dispelling some of those. What are some of the myths that you observe or experience on the bench when it comes to this type of work? How would you respond to this question?
I think the one thing I want to start off by responding to is that I do think that there's a lot of DRB cases that can take longer, right? But part of that is not necessarily, part of that is going to be due to the issues in the case, obviously. Part of that is also due to the history of the case as well, whether it's been before the court before. But what I would say is I think that sometimes the reason a case feels like it will take longer is because parties are not represented, right? It is because parties may not fully understand the expectations of being in court. They may not understand what the law says, right? They may not understand the presumption in place, the factors, that the court has to consider. And frankly, sometimes even the obligations put on them, right? So if they are referred to mediation, if we do provide them with some assistance of how to maybe they can resolve it themselves, they just don't follow through, they don't do it. And so sometimes a delay is just a result of that. And I think that if folks were represented, I do think there's, and I have seen it, many DRB cases that don't have to be so protracted, right? Where you can really sort of from the beginning, really assist someone to understand what is needed, what they might have to present to a judge, or what they want. Sometimes really what folks need is somebody to assist them with that. So I guess as to that point, I would say is that there are some cases that can take a long time, but not all cases need to. I also do think the other thing I would say about it is emotional. I think you have to accept and embrace that, right? You are helping parties that are struggling with custody and it involves your child, right? And so there's going to be a lot of emotions, but they're not personal, right? They're not personal. They are a lot of times just fear, uncertainty. And so I would just say to folks that it's been my experience that even people at times who have a lot of emotions in the courtroom, I think when they feel they can be heard or you also can maintain a tone to try to get out what's going on, are very lovely, respectable individuals in court. So I guess I would also echo that as well.
I'd be remiss, Judge Sanchez, if I didn't share just kudos to you as, part of this community. Had someone on our team really observe and experience the time that you've taken to hear litigants. And so whether you are on the counsel side or on the bench, those emotions are so real the way that you describe them. And it makes a big difference when you create space for that. And so thank you for those efforts that you make on the bench. We've seen them firsthand make a difference on litigants. So I just want to make, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you for that. These are all really important things to be talking about and unpacking. We start off by saying the need is extreme, and then we talk about some barriers that may show up as myths to dispel or talk a little bit more about or give a little bit more nuance to. And these are big things that we're talking about, various issues that parties are experiencing, anything from mental health to domestic violence, whether safety is on someone's mind, thinking about how long you're going to be in a matter for. We're talking about pro bono. Typically, that means someone has a full-time job, sometimes very much more than full-time job, depending on where you are. And I'll add another potential myth to dispel from my perspective for pro bono at Children's Law Center that I think Jennedy and Jacob and Judge Sanchez will resonate with you all, and that is the need for experience. I haven't done this before, sounds really compelling. I'm actually not worried about the time, or I'm not worried about engaging, with people on these cases or what the spectrum of, issues are, but I've never done it. And this is about children. This is about family. And I love my children and my family. And so I don't want to mess something up. You want to do well. And so I think something that we often talk about and remind people of is experience isn't required. We understand that our pro bono volunteers have different expertise, but the legal skills that you have are so transferable. And I think we hear a lot of volunteers talk about maybe what's surprising after they put them in a pro bono case and realize, oh, I am actually able to help without having, family law in my background. And so I wanted to just note that. And something that one of my volunteers in the past said was, I was nervous about this. And then I thought, if this person didn't have me, if this case didn't have me, there wouldn't be anyone. And I thought it would be me or no one. And I picked me. And I said, I pick you too. And so that really is the reality. One of our takeaways today could be pick yourself to do this work, because the absence is no one, and it's the impact that we're all seeing and experiencing. So kind of getting to what I'm referencing here, the value add, and what you're hearing already about having representation, that access to justice, the ability to navigate a system and understand the expectations and moving through the process. I'd love to just talk a little bit more with some additional examples of what we see as the value add of pro bono representation in these cases. So whether there's a case that comes to mind or just a theme that you see from your various perspectives, I'd love to just hear some additional examples about what has been the value add for pro bono. So let's start, maybe Judge Sanchez, just going back to you. What do you see from the bench?
Do you want me to address GALs? Is that separate from just individuals representing?
Anything, whatever strikes you. The GAL perspective is great, but just generally.
So I'll start a little bit with the GAL perspective and say that is just amazing. Right. So if I have the opportunity and I have a case where I feel like a guardian ad litem could really assist, right? It's based on some unique circumstances or some issues going on in the case. I have had amazing GALs participate, and they've really changed the tone, the dynamic of the case. They've really presented, even if it ends up going to a trial, at times just the evidence that I need as the judge to be able to do my job. But a lot of times, actually, what's happened is they're able to help the parties reach a resolution by the fact that they're involved, by the fact that they're representing the child, and that they're getting the documents and information that one co-parent may not trust is true about the child. But then when presented with the evidence by the GALs, they're able to help them. In terms of individuals, actually being attorneys and representing parties, again, I think what you said is fantastic. And that is, if they don't have someone, they have no one, right? And so from simple things like issuing discovery, responding to discovery, not knowing they actually have to respond to discovery, by when, what can they ask for, how to label things if they want to present something to a judge, as simple as that. So you will find that your legal training is perfectly suited and that you can put it to good use with the litigants, and that you have the capability, obviously the ability to, come up to speed, right? And be able to do the work. And I think that it just can really change things for litigants. And even if it is also just even as a, helping them or advising them on, temporary custody orders, or even an agreement that they might be able to reach with their co-parent. I just think that just provides such stability for that family and for that child, that I think it is something that if you are able or considering, you should really consider.
Thank you so much for that. And that speaks volumes. We are doing the best we can at legal services organizations. And just as Jacob was using that really impactful number previously of 6,000 filings, and you can do 100, we know that looking at the numbers across the DRB judges, Judge Sanchez, you're seeing hundreds and hundreds of cases, and we are, chipping away at that need. So for you to see the full breadth and depth of these cases and be able to share that value add speaks volumes. So thank you so much for that. Jacob, what would you say from your perspective, some additional examples of the value add that we haven't already discussed?
Yeah. So again, I'm a little bit off to the side here because of not in DRB. And one of, for a civil protection order, I would say the main value add is our clients are accused of things, and not all accusations are true, right? And so if it's complicated. I have no data or stats or how many what percentage of positions, but it is not it's not as it is more than zero where where the case is ultimately found to be unfounded, right? And most of the cases, the cases where people kind of come to us are going to be more of those people who are innocent of what they're charged with. So in terms of a value add, right, having no order in place, right, that is restricting your relationship with your children is, how can you quantify that value, right? It is priceless, right? It is something that any one of us who are parents would pay everything in our bank account and as many banks as we could rob, right, to try and do, right? And so that's number one. But for the kind of more complicated cases, a lot of it is kind of, to go on with what we're all talking about, is just having someone there, right, is incredibly helpful. We had a case where our client, turns out, was innocent, right? He showed, we had the proof, but he was going through a messy divorce, right? And he did not want another fight, right? He didn't want to see his now ex-wife at all, so he was fine with the order, right? And even though I was saying it was going to be a pretty quick trial, he didn't want there to be a fight, right? But what he cared about is that what she wanted was going from co-parenting in a marriage, right, where everyone's living together, to full physical custody and supervised visits once a week, supervised by her mother, right? That's what she wanted. So this drastic thing. And he didn't know what to do. He was going to just accept. That's where he was, because divorce is hard. Right? He just wanted to go through with it. And I was able to be like, can I just talk to her? Right? Can I just talk to her? He's like, fine. And I talked to her, and I didn't use any lawyer speak. I was just like, okay, well, basically, I mean, the kind of the thing I said was, well, you want your kids to have a father, right? Right. And you want there to be a relationship, right? And she was like, well, yeah, but all this. I'm like, right. Well, it seems like you're dealing with all of that in the divorce, right? She's like, well, yeah. So then what we were able to do is basically just have the order of protection and just punt the custody to whatever is going to happen with the divorce, right? And he literally a month and a half ago sent me a picture of like a selfie with his kids, right? And he has basically joint custody. He has it like kind of thing, I think Tuesday, Thursday, whatever, the normal kind of joint custody. And I wasn't a magician, right? It's literally like talking about what Jen was talking about, just showing up, right? It's literally, I think the conversation with the mom was 10 minutes, 15. It was not, oh, how dare you? It's literally just like asking a few open-ended questions that allowed her to kind of lower the volume and lower the temperature and realize, like, yeah, this is not in my kid's best interest. And so the big value add, again, besides kind of these kind of cases where the accusations are unfounded, is in the process and in just fundamental fairness, right? Is that like what Judge Sanchez was saying, is that these are very emotional cases, and that's why lawyers exist, right? Is to be the bridge and to be kind of that kind of reasonable, rational, kind of logical, intermediary, where you can take what you get from your client and the care and the passion, and then just figure out objectively, okay, what makes sense here, right? And usually you're gonna just get your client into a better state, and usually it's in a kind of actually kind of from a brass tacks, being able to see their kid or all that stuff better. But a lot of it is just they're going to be able to feel heard more, right? Courts are really confusing to everyone, right? There's this thing of pro bonos being confused about what's happening in court. Think about pro se litigants, right, who don't have a law degree. And so people feel like, I don't even know what happened. I went through a tornado. And I agree, the judges in DC are absolutely phenomenal with pro se litigants. It's really amazing. People are kind, people are patient, right? But still, it's really hard to be a pro se litigant. So just having someone who was there, right? It's kind of like going to a doctor with a friend or a family member who you can ask, like, what happened? And then you can just explain. And they're like, okay, well, what if I want to change it? Well, then you do X, Y, and Z, right? And so again, it's just that process, and that fairness is really the huge value add.
Go ahead, Genevieve. Thank you so much, Jacob. Really appreciate those examples.
Yeah, I'll just tag along. Some of that is what I would have said, Jacob, as well, is, our litigants are often looking for emotional justice, right? And they're not maybe always going to get that in the court themselves. And so you can really, as a pro bono attorney, help provide them with that emotional justice and help them take all of these strong emotions, right? That in family law is so emotionally charged, and burden that and help walk alongside them into the courtroom through the process and help them navigate it, just as Jacob and Judge Sanchez said. I really want to tap in, though, on something that Judge Sanchez talked about, and that is helping get a settlement. So I think that's the biggest pro bono value add that we see at the Pro Bono Center that's different than what's been mentioned. It is so important for an attorney to be able to explain to the parties joint doesn't always mean 50-50. Sole doesn't mean just one party, right? And really help the parties understand what each of them value, and then recenter it back on their child and how to navigate this. Like, the reality is you have a child with this person and you have to navigate this life with them. And so you have to figure out how. And you'll hear the judges say it a lot, but the parties know their lives best, right? And if you go to trial and a judge issues an order, they might not have all the nitty-gritty things in there that the parties want. And so it's always best, I think, to have pro bono counsel, just like Jacob said, reach across the aisle, have a conversation that isn't the direct tension, help understand all the parties' values, and then write that into a very clear order, and an order that not only helps in this time, but thinking about long term. How do we want to rotate holidays moving forward? If the kid's going to transition from elementary to middle school, what's going to be the decision-making process? Breaking down for people, not just what it means to, confer in good faith, and if not, go to mediation. Well, what does that mean? Breaking down, you're going to have 2 conversations, and if that doesn't work, go to an expert and then call multi-door. And so we've seen that success so much in so many stories where parties go in at the initial hearing both wanting sole, not knowing what it means, stepping in the hallway, having a conversation, and working out a 4 or 5 page order that gives them a map to co-parent for the next few years or longer. And then, as Jacob said, letting them know what to do if it doesn't work out. A lot of parties come in and think that's their only trial, number one, and they also come in thinking that a permanent custody order means permanent forever, and not that it can be modified in circumstances. So I think that's where we see the biggest value add, is just breaking down those barriers, understanding values, and then helping create a roadmap for the family moving forward in regards to settlement.
These are great examples. So hopefully that is shining through to everyone. This speaks volumes to hear the impact, and hopefully it's also coming through that there is something complicated about these matters for the parties experiencing them. We are talking about people's lives, their family, their children. So very much high emotions is when we're in conflict, navigating the legal system when it's really designed for lawyers and not for mom, dad, grandma, etc. But to see that it's not that complicated, what we are doing as lawyers to be able to move the ball forward, the kind of conversation that Jacob's mentioning, the way you're, just, oh my goodness, did we all have a response of permanent custody orders are not actually permanent and they're modifiable? Well, we know that, but when you get that piece of paper that says permanent custody order, you think permanent means permanent. So there's a lot of information about how the system is working and not being part of that conflict. We're not asking for custody. This is not our child. We're not a part of the protection order. And so being able to add in the skills that we have, not being part of the dispute, can go such a long way. And again, no one's saying you've had to have done it before. There are skills that are just so transferable, and a lot of low-hanging fruit, dare I say, that lawyers can do in these matters and really move the ball forward. Jennedy was speaking earlier about, a myth and something that may come up around family-related work, and that is what I hear from time to time, someone who's had an experience that wasn't ideal in some way, and maybe, they're hearing everything that we're talking about and the value adds that are really compelling, but thinking, I don't know, I had this experience, or someone I spoke with had this experience, and it just left a bad taste in their mouth. It was something that wasn't encouraging to do the work. And so I want to turn back to that and just acknowledge that really head on, because I think when I hear those things come up with family law, they don't pass right away. There's something that people kind of hear, and it can stick. And so I want to ask each of you, what would you tell someone, whether it's the person who had an experience that, for whatever reason, it's something that left a bad taste in their mouth, using that expression again, the length of time that it took, or just what the resolution was, didn't feel maybe as good as they wanted it to or hoped it would. The emotions of it, was a lot. What would we say to someone who's experienced that, or the person who, there are many people that exist in this category, they just talked to that person who had that experience and said that, and that was kind of enough. So I know, Jennedy, you said before, hey, not every case is alike. And so I want to see if there's anything you might add on to, Jacob, if I can go to you, and then Judge Sanchez, what might you to say to this prospective pool of volunteers who are hesitant to do it again or do it in the first place?
Sure, I can just add really quickly.
Oh,
Yes,
go ahead.
every
Yeah.
case is different. Here's the thing, there's no shortage of cases that we need help with. So if you have a specific type of case you want, or specific issues you want to avoid, we can screen for that. And if we don't have a case like that, we can ask legal aid, we can ask NLSP, Children's Law Center, Rising for Justice. We all work together because the goal is to get people represented. If there's a certain role you want to represent a grandparent because you didn't enjoy representing a parent, or you want to be a guardian ad litem, we can connect you. I will also say we have different levels of cases. So we now will place cases limited scope, meaning for part of the case. So Judge Sanchez mentioned somebody needs help with discovery, and you don't want to be in court, you just want to do transactional stuff. There's ways that we can help mold your experience as well. If you want to try something different, or try something that's different in constraint or scope of service.
Yeah, I think I would just kind of echo all of that. And the main thing is that every single case is different, because every single family and person is different, right? And what I kind of, from my perspective, right, the thing that we care about, like what Jennedy is saying, is matching the case with the person. We are incredibly grateful to all pro bono attorneys, right? Well, no matter what it is. This is what we do full time. This is not what you do full time, right? And so any amount of work is a value add, right? And what is really important to me is both in this, and then also we do record sealing we do pro bono, is what I find is the more times you do it, the easier and easier it is, right? Part of that, I guess, is skill set, but it really isn't, right? It's you kind of, you've been to the neighborhood before, right? You know where the courthouse, you know what the login is, right? You know all these really, really small things that build up to create a lot of anxiety. And the second case you do, you already know those answers, right? So you're able to actually be involved with the substance of the case and really helping people more than the first time where you're like, I mean, as Jen was saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to, oh my God, I don't want it, whatever. And you're like, after you do a case, it's like, okay, I didn't screw anything up. Everyone's fine, right? And so the thing that we always try and do is getting people back in the door. And so it just is what Jenny said, it is, we would love if that person who had a hard time, love to have a conversation about what happened, right? What was it? Was it something where it's just like, anybody who heard that case, you're like, oh, that's a rough time. Or like, anybody who had that case, that's going to be a rough time. Kind of, you got to spin the wheel again. It's going to be fine. Or was it something specific where, you know, it may not have been a good match, or there wasn't it was our fault. There was kind of a training vacuum or whatever that we can kind of help with, because it is, we just need the help, right? Not to be too blunt about it, but we just need the help. And so whatever it is that you can offer, we want to do whatever it is to get that help. And there is not going to be a sales pitch. If you want to say, you know, you're only going to represent this person or this type or do this, fantastic. As Jenny said, we got a bunch of that. Whatever that is, we got a bunch of it, right? And so I think that's kind of the main thing, is finding that match, right? And really, and having that conversation about what's interesting to you, right? And how can we kind of find kind of a square for a square, or circle for a circle.
Thank you so much. Judge Sanchez, what might you say to folks who are hesitant to do it again or in the first place?
I think the only other thing I would add to what all the other panelists have said is that anytime you're involved in litigation, right, I don't think it's particularly unique to family that you may have a tough case, or that you may have an experience that, for whatever reason, may not have been what you wanted it to be. I think that's litigation, right? I spent years as a prosecutor, and there were some really tough cases, not just because the case was tough to prove, just from the interaction with either witnesses, the emotional piece of it. And so I think that, I don't think that DRB is unique. I think that what I would say is, I would definitely agree that once you've done one, there's, you know, there's like a sunk cost that now is less stressful for you, right? You know how to come in and use the WebEx and share your exhibits. You have a sense maybe of at least one of the judge who appeared before. And so that your focus or your nervousness, if that was, you know, you're just more comfortable. And so what I would tell folks is that I do think it really is important to have a sense of whether you yourself have particular triggers in terms of cases, and just make sure you're upfront about those, because you want to also just do the best that you can for the litigants. And so definitely, you know, talk to folks, ask questions in terms of when you're being placed with the cases. But I think that, I don't think it's unique to family. So if you've heard that and you think, oh, I'll go do a different kind of litigation or pro bono, I think there's difficult cases everywhere. Civil, and I mean, I think you can find it anywhere.
I agree. I think that's really helpful. I was thinking about this question and a word that came to mind was just normalizing. I was thinking about normalizing the difficult experiences. And so you just touched on that, Judge Sanchez. This is going to happen in other areas. And sometimes I'll talk with volunteers and it'll come up in conversation. Well, this actually isn't that unlike my paid work. This isn't unlike, other, challenging parts of client representation, though it may look and feel so, different in many ways. So I think, normalizing that it can be challenging and not just in family cases. I think normalizing taking a break, I would also add. So I've talked with volunteers who've said, I used to do some family law cases and I need a break from that. I'll do it again. I'll say, take the break, completely understand. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for the time. When it's right for you, it's going to be right for me, because the need, just as Jacob said, right, we've got it. We've got something at all times. And so normalizing a break if people need a break or if they're not ready for it. And I really wanted to touch too on just talking with people and discussing it. I've had some interesting conversations when people have brought up what they felt were poor experiences. And sometimes our conversations led to an opportunity for me to say, that wasn't just you. That wasn't just your case. This piece that you're experiencing this way is actually quite common. And then sometimes that makes it feel different. Like there's not like you could have done a different thing and gotten to a different outcome. This is actually kind of part of how these cases may go. Or something just feeling like, oh, we worked so hard and we didn't get the outcome that we were wanting, and maybe not having some perspective to see what value add was present, and really unpacking the discussion to say, well, okay, you tried this out and ultimately this arrangement didn't work, but if you weren't there, would X, Y, and Z have happened? I don't think so, or you were able to get this out of it. And so sometimes the value benefits might not have been as apparent, to you doing it pro bono, if that is sort of your experience in a vacuum. And some of us who are doing this all day, we're seeing a lot more and might be able to shed a little bit of light on that experience. But it will feel the way that it will feel. We will validate that. We will respect that. We will do our best to find a good match. And you're hearing the energy that I think is so true to this community. We want representation for our DC neighbors. There are lots of legal needs. There are so many ways to get involved. We want to help dispel myths and provide supports for you to be able to meet the huge demand for family-related matters. And if we do all of that and it still needs to be something else, thank you for helping someone, because there is so much to go around. We want to be able to share a little bit about how you can get involved and what that looks like. I've repeated myself that you don't have to do this. And I say that because in our pro bono programs, those present here and others in the community, you're going to get training. You're going to have some type of support. If it's a mentor, in some instances, maybe there's a supervision element or co-counseling element, depending on what you're working with. Maybe there's a bite-sized limited scope opportunity or full case representation clinics, et cetera. There's just a lot. And so we're going to send some details of point of contacts for all of us, the organization Mothers Outreach Network, that I mentioned at the start of the call. But I do want to give just a couple of moments of time for Jennedy and Jacob to say more about their organizations. And then I want to share about an event that's already been noted in the chat after that, before we open up for questions and close for today. So Jennedy, I'll go to you to just talk a little bit about people who are interested in doing pro bono volunteering, how they can get involved with your work, and if there is anything required, training, mentoring, support, those sorts of things.
Sure. Yeah, we have a really robust program where we provide training on demand, and also we provide two mentors. We provide an internal mentor, and then we also provide an outside external expert mentor from the private bar. And so you'll get two mentors. You'll get sample pleadings, anything you need. I've been walking through with an attorney their entire from start to trial, prepping for trial and everything to mooting. So we provide all kinds of support. We place cases for family custody, child support, and we provide limited scope and full representation. And again, we represent either parents or third parties.
Excellent. Jacob, what would you like to share about Rising for Justice?
Yeah, so as I say, with the civil protection orders, they are kind of mini trials. And so really what the best thing to do is just contact me and we can have a discussion. And sometimes people are interested in doing the whole thing, some people are interested in doing part of it. But it is my job to make sure people feel supported. And as Jenny said, the mentor will be me, right? It will be make sure to kind of that you're supported in every way possible. The kind of rule of thumb I have for kind of pro bono practice is I never expect anyone to be an expert at things they've never done before. And so that's kind of what I kind of go along with. And so if you're interested at all, please, yeah, just reach out. I think the contact information will be shared.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I wanted to mention, and for Children's Law Center, what I just said in the beginning of this is true. So we have training and mentoring available. We have a listserv people can sign up for to kind of see what examples of cases are and the needs that we have. You'll always see guardian ad litem cases there. That faucet isn't getting turned off anytime soon. I want to mention an opportunity to learn more about what we're discussing today in person. And so if you're not already familiar, there is an open house for the domestic relations branch. We also have other open houses that get into the DV field of work, but for the domestic relations branch, there is an open house this coming Monday or a week from today. That is going to be at DC Superior Court from 12 p.m. to 1:30. Jennedy and I will be the host of this open house along with Jody Feldman, pro bono manager at DC Courts. And what we will end up doing is touring relevant parts of the courthouse, observing part of a family law matter, debriefing that with those in attendance, and then having what I think is absolutely invaluable, and that is informal Q&A time with judges with the robes off. So just having time to really hear from the judges, ask them any question on your mind about this work. It's great conversation. It's what you can't do when you're in the courtroom in the middle of your case as a representation for a party. So if you haven't signed up, please do. I imagine I was going to say either Chris or Christina is going to have that in the chat by the time I can even reference it. So you can go to that link to sign up if you're interested. I thank our panelists so much again for being here today. And I'm going to pass over to Chris to see what questions we can answer before we log off.
Absolutely. Can you hear me? Incredible. Headphones are working now. So we do have a question from the chat, and this person asks, what kind of time commitment is there for the child representative person? And do they have to be an attorney?
If I'm understanding correctly, the child representative, if that is the guardian ad litem role that we're talking about today, or GAL, that is a position that does require you to be a lawyer in DC, and that lawyer represents the best interests of the child in a custody matter. I will say that there is lots of opportunity for people who are not lawyers to work alongside lawyers in these cases. We have investigators at Children's Law Center who help us get this work done. And we have many pro bono volunteers who have various professional staff who are working with them as well. So if you are not a lawyer but interested in doing this work, there's definitely a role that you can play alongside a lawyer. And if you do the time commitment, I tell people to for sure plan on a year commitment. It might resolve more quickly because having a lawyer get involved, the way that you've heard everyone speak here from Jennedy about settlements, piggybacking off of what Judge Sanchez had said, that is entirely true. But also you're getting to know what we've also said. Every family is different. Every case is different. That means you don't hop on, even if you've done 100 of these, and say, oh, this person should get custody. It's about having humility and really getting to learn and know people and what the issues are and the conflict, et cetera. So we find this to be manageable over the course of that time. But you do want to think about a long-term commitment in terms of duration of the case. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you. And we have one more question. This person is asking, what opportunities are available for law students?
Did you say law students, Chris?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Jenna,
Sure. Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, it didn't naturally come up, is with the changing landscape, there is such a pressing need in family law for our immigration clients. And so we have a lot of clients that need family safety planning. They need power of attorneys, both custodial and individual. And we also have a lot of families doing special immigrant juvenile status. So getting predicate orders of custody and findings for special immigrant juvenile status in family court before they start in the immigration system filing for that visa. And so we need attorneys in that area, but we also need law students. Law students, especially with language access skills, are huge for interpreting and translating, helping gather documents, helping navigate the process for the client as they gather documents, maybe from another country or from even here in DC, or if they've lived other places. We also have clinics. So we have clinics that are just 1-day clinics on Saturdays. We have a family law, all civil related one once a month, and then we have an immigration one quarterly, and we use law students a lot there to help just with fact gathering, intakes, etc. So
Thing. That is the end of our questions that we have listed. Like we said at the top, the contact information for our panelists will be in the follow-up email for folks who might want to follow up with any additional questions.